A luxury fishing boat drifts freely on the sea. The 4 crew members on board have vanished. Only bullet shells and bloodstains remain. The boat is called Joe Cool, a sports fishing boat worth tens of thousands of USD. It departed from Miami Beach with 4 experienced crew members and 2 unfamiliar passengers. But just 36 hours later, the entire crew disappeared without leaving a message or a distress signal. The only 2 people found, adrift on a lifeboat, claimed they were attacked by pirates and the 4 victims were killed and thrown into the sea. But this testimony immediately raised suspicion from the FBI. If it were pirates, why was all the property left intact? One of the 2 survivors is wanted for charges of sexual assault and stealing nearly $100,000. Why did he rent the Joe Cool? Was he acquainted with the person behind all of this? This is not just a missing persons case. It is a cold-blooded execution that has been meticulously planned and carefully executed. But the evidence, no matter how small, will never sink to the bottom of the ocean. Follow until the end of the story. Subscribe now to uncover the truth behind Joe Cool, the fishing boat turned death ship. On September 22, 2007, at the Miami Beach Marina, a 14.3-meter fishing boat named Joe Cool left the port, heading toward Bimini Beach, the Bahamas archipelago, more than 80 kilometers away. On board were 4 people: Captain Jake Branham, 27, his wife Kelly, his half-brother Scott Gamble, and Samuel Kyrie, a close family friend. They were seasoned veterans, having survived storms and spent years learning how to survive on the open sea. But that day, the trip wasn't about fishing. 2 strange men paid $4,000 in cash to privately charter the boat to Bimini. Although there were cheaper and more convenient options like flying, the 2 passengers insisted on taking the boat. They claimed they couldn't fly because their passports had been mistakenly packed in checked luggage. The story seemed reasonable, but it left an eerie feeling among the crew. However, no one worried too much. As long as the money was legitimate, they would provide the service. The next day, the boat didn't return as planned. Initially, Jake's uncle, Jeff Branham, who owned the Joe Cool, wasn't overly concerned. Delays had happened before, usually because passengers wanted to stay longer fishing or got drunk in Bimini. But by the end of the day, still no contact, and an uneasy feeling began to grow. Jake had shared with his family that he was only taking the 2 passengers to a small boat offshore, where they would meet their girlfriends. Then, he planned to go fishing and return in the late afternoon to prepare for the scheduled trip the next day. With a packed schedule, Jake always managed his time precisely. The sudden disappearance was out of character. At that point, the most plausible hypothesis was that the boat encountered technical failure. But no distress signal was sent. But the radio was silent, no distress calls. A modern boat like Joe Cool couldn't just disappear without a trace. Unless something worse had happened. The United States Coast Guard, USCG, immediately launched a large-scale search operation. Helicopters took off, scanning the vast stretches of sea. Patrol boats drew circles covering the entire maritime route from Miami to Bimini. All radars, satellites, and control stations were mobilized. But after dozens of hours, no results were found. Authorities began to suspect, could this case be more than just a disappearance? This sea area is known for drug smuggling activities, piracy, and many boat hijackings. But if this were a hijacking, it's hard to understand why the 4 experienced crew members didn't manage to send out a distress signal. 36 hours later, aboard the cutter P Island, an officer on deck spotted a blurry dot on the horizon. A strange object with no clear movement. The patrol boat immediately changed course and approached. The command tower identified it. It was a sports fishing boat. White, matching the description of Joe Cool. But its position, no one could believe. The boat was adrift about 48 kilometers north of Cuba and 225 kilometers off its original course. A destination no fisherman would aim for. Not because of a lack of fish, but because it was completely opposite to the current's flow. Meaning someone had deliberately steered the boat in that direction instead of letting it drift naturally north. Upon confirming Joe Cool's position, the USCG set up a perimeter, following high-risk target approach procedures. They suspected there might be pirates or armed individuals still on the boat. Weapons were drawn, and patrol boats closed in from several directions. After receiving orders, the officers quickly boarded the boat. They searched the main deck and cabins, but the entire crew and passengers had vanished. A preliminary examination showed personal wallets, car keys, and fishing rods were still in place. No signs of luggage or personal belongings being gathered before departure. This was an important detail, showing the crew didn't leave the boat voluntarily. On the deck, investigators found scattered bloodstains, but the source was unclear. While it was suspected to be fish blood from fishing, the possibility that it was human blood couldn't be ruled out. Notably, one of the lifeboats on the boat was missing. Data from the ship's course and wind direction showed that the lifeboat had likely been deployed recently. This opens up the possibility that someone had left the boat. Meanwhile, a storm is approaching. An urgent expanded search operation begins, including searching the uninhabited Anguilla Cay Island through the night. Joe Cool is towed back to shore to protect the crime scene for investigation. With signs of irregularities at the crime scene, the USCG immediately requested the FBI's assistance in the investigation. On September 25, 2007, a search helicopter scanning the southern waters off Anguilla Cay spotted an unusual object floating amidst the waves. An orange lifeboat with a canopy drifting in the wind. The faint inscription, Joe Cool, was still visible on the side. As the helicopter descended, the wind from the rotor blew the tarp off the boat. Below were two men, curled up in a cramped space. They showed no signs of serious injuries, their clothes were dry, and they appeared alert. But their eyes reflected clear signs of tension and fatigue. Due to the loud noise, one of the men scribbled a note on paper and held it up for the rescue team. North Bimini. We were left on the boat, robbed, 4 people were killed. A short message, but enough to make the entire team change expression. The identities of the 2 men were confirmed shortly afterward. Guillermo Zarbozo, 18, a Cuban-American citizen, and Kirby Archer, 36, who had lived in Arkansas. They were the 2 passengers who had chartered the Joe Cool to Bimini on September 22nd. They were the last people on board, with the 4 victims. With initial statements claiming the incident was a pirate attack, the FBI and USCG immediately adjusted the investigation focus. The search for the victims, Jake Branham and his wife Kelly, Scott Gamble, and Samuel Carey, was officially canceled. The focus now was, could it really be pirates? Or were the 2 survivors the key pieces in this deadly mystery at sea? After Joe Cool was towed to shore, a special FBI investigation team conducted a second examination of the crime scene. The boat was completely sealed off. Any small detail could become a clue to unlock the entire case. Inside the boat, they found 4 spent 9mm bullet shells, the same type the survivors claimed were used by the pirates to kill the other 4 people. At first, this seemed to corroborate the testimonies of Kirby and Guillermo, but what was discovered next completely turned the case around. The items on the boat showed signs of being rummaged through, but nothing had been taken. A snorkel, a dart, handcuff keys, electronics, and fishing gear worth over $70,000 all remained intact. No signs of theft, no loss of property, and no reason for a group of pirates to kill and leave without taking anything valuable. When Guillermo and Kirby were brought back to shore, they were led past the Joe Cool boat. Guillermo, with a nonchalant attitude, turned to the FBI agent and said, "I've never been on that boat." A statement that caused the entire investigative team to freeze. He was found on the Joe Cool lifeboat, but denied ever stepping foot on the boat. Immediately, the FBI agents noted the contradiction in his statement. Guillermo's behavior became highly suspicious. Both men were separated and detained aboard the Coast Guard ship before they could leave the area. At a temporary FBI station set up near the Miami port, the official interrogation began. Guillermo Zarbozo, 18, remained relatively calm during the first hours. He recounted this scripted story. 3 Cuban pirates boarded the boat, killing Jake, Kelly, Scott, and Samuel in turn. They then forced Kirby Archer to steer the Joe Cool toward Cuba. According to Guillermo, the boat ran for 8 hours until it ran out of fuel. The pirates then left on another boat. He and Kirby boarded a lifeboat, drifting and waiting for rescue. The story seemed plausible until Kirby spoke up. In the second interrogation room, Kirby told a completely different version of events. He didn't mention the 3 pirates wearing striped shirts as Guillermo had described. The order in which the victims were killed also didn't match. 2 testimonies, 1 incident, but it was as if they were describing 2 different plays. The agents quickly noticed a major inconsistency. If it really were pirates, why would they leave all the valuable property on the boat? Why kill 4 people but spare 2 strangers? And more importantly, why would Kirby and Guillermo abandon a modern boat with full communication equipment to get on a lifeboat and drift in the storm? In all recorded pirate attacks, no pirates ever left behind equipment, personal belongings, and cargo worth tens of thousands of dollars. The behavior of the 2 survivors didn't fit that of victims. It mirrored exactly the actions of those pretending to survive to cover up a crime. As the contradictions in their statements continued, the FBI began to investigate the backgrounds of both suspects. Guillermo Zarbozo, 18, lived with his family in South Florida with no criminal record. He had worked as a security guard for a small office building, always appearing polite and respectful. Personal records showed he had applied to the police academy and dreamed of becoming a law enforcement officer. But Kirby Archer was completely different. Records from Arkansas immediately lit up. He was wanted for 2 serious charges. The first, sexual assault in an unsolved case. The second, and more serious, he had embezzled $92,000 while working as a customer care manager at a large Walmart supermarket, then fled the state. This information immediately changed the course of the case. The FBI concluded Kirby had a clear motive to commit the crime. He needed a means to escape the US, and Joe Cool was the perfect ticket. Kirby was immediately arrested to await processing under an existing fugitive warrant. But the case didn't stop there. Guillermo, the man accompanying Kirby, had no criminal record, no clear evidence, and still retained his freedom. The federal prosecutor started feeling the pressure. Murder on the sea is one of the hardest crimes to prosecute when there is no clear evidence or alibi. Each hour passed is another opportunity for Guillermo to cover his tracks, erase evidence, or deny the crime forever. The FBI had to find evidence, and quickly. While Guillermo remained silent, FBI agents quietly expanded their investigation in Florida. A search warrant was issued for Guillermo's residence in Miami. During the search, they found a small file bag hidden in the drawer of his desk, containing several receipts, most of them ordinary. But one receipt made the investigation team stop in their tracks. It was a receipt for purchasing 9mm bullets, the date printed matching exactly with the time the incident occurred. More importantly, the batch number and brand of the bullets matched perfectly with the shells found on the Joe Cool. Although it wasn't a gun, the bullet shells and the paperwork became extremely powerful circumstantial evidence. The receipt was immediately sealed, analyzed, and added to the prosecution file. FBI agents returned to Kirby's cell, bringing copies of the evidence, images of the bullet shells, and comparison reports. Next to them, the prosecutor coldly offered, "If you remain silent, the death penalty is the only outcome." Faced with the physical evidence and legal pressure, Kirby began to lose his resolve. He stared at the bullet shells on the table. Things that once lay in his hands now became the chain leading him to hell. After a few minutes of silence, he whispered, "I didn't want to kill them, but I had no choice." From here, the real picture of the crime was officially revealed. In his first confession after pleading guilty, Kirby began to reveal a series of bizarre details. He said he met Guillermo at a small auto repair shop in Hialeah, Florida, where Guillermo worked as a night security guard. Kirby introduced himself as a CIA agent, preparing to carry out a secret mission in Cuba. He promised Guillermo that if he successfully assisted on the trip, he would be recruited by the CIA. To a teenager who had never stepped out of the state, the offer seemed like a ticket to the world of heroes. But in reality, the FBI concluded this was merely a script from a desperate criminal. Kirby knew he was wanted in Arkansas and was trying to escape to Cuba, where there was no extradition treaty with the US. Next, during the boat rental process, he was the one who fired the first shot, killing Captain Jake right on the deck. Kelly, Jake's wife, panicked and ran into the cabin, only to be killed a few minutes later. The whole boat descended into chaos. Scott and Samuel tried to fight back. Kirby claimed that it was Guillermo who fired the shot to kill the other two. Then together, they threw the bodies of all 4 victims into the sea at night. None of them were ever found. In exchange for his confession, Kirby signed a plea agreement to avoid the death penalty. However, Guillermo, the remaining suspect, still vehemently denied all charges. Throughout the interrogations, he repeatedly said, "I am CIA personnel. This was a secret mission, and I am not allowed to disclose more." Before becoming a wanted murderer on the sea, Kirby Archer was once an exemplary citizen in the eyes of his neighbors in a small town in Arkansas. He was born into a working-class family, with his father working as a repairman and his mother as a supermarket cashier. No one would have guessed that the skinny child, who quietly read books about the military and the CIA, would later become a federal criminal. After graduating from high school, Kirby worked in various small jobs. He was smart, communicated well, and always knew how to please others. It was these abilities that helped him get hired as a customer service manager at a large Walmart supermarket. A stable job, but for Kirby, stability meant boredom, and he began to deceive. In less than 2 years, Kirby secretly transferred virtual refunds to his personal account. He did it systematically, using false identities, and misled the accounting department by handling internal issues. In total, he embezzled over $92,000 before an unexpected audit uncovered everything. When the arrest warrant was issued, Kirby had vanished. But just a few weeks later, another more serious accusation surfaced, this time even more severe: sexual assault. A female co-worker reported that Kirby had harassed and coerced her in the warehouse, threatening to fire her if she spoke out. The investigation wasn't completed before Kirby completely disappeared from Arkansas, becoming a federal fugitive. Months later, his last trace was discovered in Florida. There, with a new identity and an innocent appearance, he began weaving a new life with lies about the CIA, about national missions, and luring an innocent 18-year-old teenager into a crazy plan: hijacking a boat, crossing the sea, and eliminating witnesses. 1 year after the Sea Massacre, in September 2008, Guillermo Zarbozo, at that time just 19 years old, was officially brought to trial in federal court in Florida. He faced 16 criminal charges, including first-degree murder, armed robbery, vehicle hijacking, and conspiracy to illegally cross the border. Throughout the trial, Guillermo continued to maintain his position. He was just a recruit for the CIA and acted on a secret mission. However, when confronted by the prosecutors with all the physical evidence, from the bullet purchase receipts, fingerprints on the boat, and Kirby's testimony, the silence began to overwhelm him. The trial lasted for several days, under intense scrutiny from the media. Finally, after more than 4 hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously agreed. Guillermo was guilty of all charges. Kirby's trial did not require lengthy debate, as he had already pled guilty to save his life. Kirby Archer and Guillermo Zarbozo were both sentenced, 5 consecutive life sentences without parole. This meant they would die behind bars, and every morning when they woke up, the sound of the waves would no longer be music, but a permanent reminder of the crimes they had committed. The Joe Cool case concluded with 2 harsh life sentences, but the scars left behind would never heal. The families of the 4 victims, Jake, Kelly, Scott, and Samuel, could not bury their loved ones. There was no grave to visit, no closure to call complete justice. Investigators called it one of the hardest murder cases to prosecute in U.S. maritime judicial history. Joe Cool, from a luxury fishing boat, became a symbol of a cold-blooded murder at sea. Since then, numerous changes in maritime security procedures, passenger control, and commercial maritime route surveillance have been implemented across the U.S. to prevent similar incidents from happening again. This video ends here. Thank you for following the Joe Cool case. Like, share, and subscribe to explore the next chilling truths. One click could be the key to unlocking an untold story. For now, goodbye, and see you next time. Kala Brown, a 30-year-old woman who was kidnapped and locked inside a metal container for 2 months. She endured brutal torture, chained, physically abused, constantly threatened with murder, and assaulted twice a day. Moreover, to crush her hope of escape, the kidnapper murdered Kala's boyfriend, Charles Carver, right before her eyes. He even boasted about his past killings, claiming no one had ever escaped him. Witnessing the horrifying scene, Kala suffered a severe psychological shock and gradually lost all hope. It may sound like something out of a horror movie, but this is a true story that happened in the US in 2016. The Kala Brown case will reveal hidden truths and terrifying secrets you've never heard before. Like and subscribe to our channel to uncover the full story right now. On August 31, 2016, 30-year-old Kala Brown and her 32-year-old boyfriend, Charles Carver, drove to Todd Kohlhepp's property at 22 Wofford Ard, Woodruff, South Carolina. They had an appointment with Todd, a successful real estate agent who had previously hired Kala for real estate-related tasks and had mentioned a new project needing her help. Kala had no idea that this meeting would change her life forever. Around 3:30 p.m., they arrived at the 96-acre property, a remote area with no neighbors nearby, just a few metal containers, an old warehouse, and scattered construction equipment. As they pulled up in front of the warehouse, Todd Kohlhepp stood at the door with a friendly and polite demeanor, just like in their previous meetings. He invited them in, saying, "Come in, I have something to show you." Without any suspicion, Kala and Charles stepped inside the warehouse. The moment they walked in, suddenly, 3 gunshots rang out. Bang, bang, bang. Immediately after, a heavy thud echoed, and Charles's body collapsed onto the ground. A thick, dark red liquid oozed from his chest, slowly spreading across the floor. Kala screamed in terror, trying to run, but Todd immediately pointed his gun at her, crushing any hope of escape. He coldly said, "No screaming. You have 2 choices. I kill you like I did him, or you live the way I want." Fear overwhelmed Kala. She realized that if she resisted, she would share Charles's fate. Todd approached, grabbed Kala's wrist tightly, and dragged her out of the warehouse. She struggled instinctively, but her small frame was no match for the large, strong man. He pulled her behind the warehouse, where an old white metal container lay hidden in the shadows. The heavy door slowly creaked open, revealing a suffocating space. Inside, there was only a tattered old blanket spread on the filthy, cold floor. Todd shoved Kala into the container, causing her to collapse onto the freezing metal floor. Then, he pulled out a long, heavy chain, its metallic sheen faintly reflecting in the darkness. He restrained her neck with the chain, securing one end tightly to a metal anchor on the container floor. Kala yanked at it, trying to break free, but the chain was too strong. The chain was just long enough for her to sit or kneel, but not to stand upright. She gasped, panicking as she realized she was truly imprisoned. Kala struggled desperately, pulling hard on the chain, screaming, "Let me out! Someone, please help me!" But the only response was eerie silence. Todd said nothing, simply slamming the container door shut. The sound of the lock clicking into place shattered all hope of escape. The confined, damp space, along with the freezing metal floor, made Kala feel as if she had fallen into an abyss of despair. She couldn't move. She had no idea what was happening outside, only hearing Todd's footsteps leaving, followed by the sound of the basement door slamming shut. The next morning, the container door swung open. The blinding light made Kala squint. Todd appeared, holding a bag of bread and a bottle of water. He tossed the food onto the cold floor, staring at Kala with an emotionless gaze, and said, "You won't die. I'll feed you. But don't even think about escaping." Kala was so hungry that she ate without thinking, but as soon as Todd left, she vomited everything due to stress. In the late afternoon, Todd returned, aggressively approaching Kala. Sensing his strange demeanor, she panicked and instinctively backed away. Suddenly, he grabbed her leg and yanked hard. Kala was dragged toward him, losing her balance and falling backward. Her head hit the metal floor, sending searing pain through her skull. Todd frantically tore at Kala's clothing. She wanted to scream, wanted to resist, but her body was too weak to respond. Shame and pain overwhelmed her, but she was powerless against the monster dominating her. After satisfying his sick urges, Todd slowly pulled out a belt, his cold gaze fixed on Kala. He picked up a sock and shoved it roughly into her mouth, silencing any cries of despair. Then he raised his hand, tightening his grip on one end of the belt. 3 seconds later, the leather cracked down, striking Kala's body. The beating continued, pushing Kala into an endless cycle of pain and despair. About an hour later, when everything was over, Todd threw her a bottle of wound medicine and a new set of clothes. He ordered her to use the medicine and get dressed. Kala struggled to sit up, her whole body aching, covered in cuts and bruises. Her hands trembled as she held the medicine, slowly applying it to her body. Then she painfully put on the clothes and lay down on the tattered blanket. In the days that followed, Kala continued to endure repeated torture. Each day, she was given only one small meal, usually fast food or canned goods, just enough to keep her alive, along with a small amount of water. He didn't do this out of kindness, but to ensure she stayed alive so he could control her longer. Even going to the bathroom was strictly controlled. If Todd was present, he would take Kala outside to relieve herself. But if he was absent, she had to endure it or manage on her own. Sometimes when the container felt too confining, Todd wanted a change of scenery to add variety and enjoy the thrill of dominance. At times, he took Kala to a warehouse, other times to his private home, or even just outside on the farm. On his free days after torturing her, Todd didn't leave immediately. Instead, he dragged Kala outside, leading her around the farm like a pet, completely depriving her of freedom. One day, he took Kala around his 96-acre property and showed her 3 strange graves. Todd told her, "Kala, if you try to escape, you'll end up in one of these graves." He confessed to her that he had repainted Charlie's car and covered it with branches to hide it. Kala Brown was terrified and slowly realized a horrifying truth. She wasn't Todd Kohlhepp's only victim. His boasts about the number of people he had killed, along with the graves he showed her, convinced Kala that many others had fallen into his hands before. Locked inside the container, Brown tried to distract herself with books and a DVD player that Kohlhepp had given her. She slept on 2 thin dog mattresses, ate crackers with peanut butter, and said whatever was necessary to survive. A few days after Kala Brown and Charlie Carver arrived at Kohlhepp's property, Carver's mother, Joanne Shiflett, began to worry after not hearing from her son. At first, she thought he was just resting after a 12-hour shift. But as days passed, she felt something was wrong. 2 days later, Leah Miller, a friend of Kala's, also became suspicious of the unusual silence and decided to investigate. The couple's family and friends grew even more alarmed when strange posts started appearing on their social media accounts. Bizarre Facebook posts claimed that Brown and Carver had gotten married, bought a house, and were happily living together. But why weren't they responding to any calls or messages? Shiflett decided to file a missing persons report, and the police quickly launched an investigation. The police inspected Kala Brown and Charlie Carver's apartment and confirmed that there were no signs indicating they had been away for an extended period. This raised even more suspicions about their sudden disappearance, forcing the police to accelerate the investigation. According to the Anderson Independent Mail, investigators began searching by collecting phone data and social media records of Brown and Carver. They discovered that Brown's phone signal had last appeared at a cell tower in Spartanburg County, but the exact location was unclear. It wasn't until the police checked Brown's Facebook records that they found messages between her and Kohlhepp discussing work on his property, an area matching the last known location of her phone signal. This was the key clue that allowed them to obtain a search warrant for Kohlhepp's property. While searching the 96-acre land, investigators heard loud banging coming from a large metal container. Inside was Kala Brown, chained by her neck and ankles to prevent her from escaping. When the police asked Brown about Charlie Carver, she replied, "He shot him." Todd Kohlhepp shot Charlie Carver 3 times in the chest. He wrapped him in a blue tarp, placed him in the tractor's bucket, locked me up here, and I never saw him again. Investigators also found Carver's car, repainted brown and abandoned in the woods. Unfortunately, this was only the beginning of a series of horrifying discoveries. Kala Brown helped police uncover the truth about Todd Kohlhepp. During her 2 months in captivity, Todd Kohlhepp told Kala Brown about his past crimes, including unsolved cases. Kala revealed he liked to brag that he was a serial killer. Kohlhepp claimed he had killed nearly 100 people and wanted to continue, as he dreamed of reaching a triple-digit body count. When police investigated these claims, they uncovered a shocking truth. Kohlhepp was linked to at least 2 unsolved cases in the area. In 2003, he murdered 4 people at a nearby motorsports store, but the mass shooting case had remained unsolved for 13 years. On December 22, 2015, just months before Brown and Carver's disappearance, Kohlhepp hired a married couple, Johnny Joe Coxey, 29, and Megan Lee McCraw Coxey, 26, residents of Spartanburg, to work on his property. He then killed the husband and assaulted the wife for a week. In the end, he killed the wife and buried both of them in the graves he later showed Kala Brown. But perhaps the most chilling part of Todd Kohlhepp's crimes was the online reviews he left about the tools and weapons he used for his kidnappings and murders. This behavior earned him the nickname, the Amazon Killer. In a review about a small shovel, he wrote, "Keep one in your car in case you need to bury a body, but forgot the big one at home." In another review about a padlock, he wrote, "Solid lock. I have 5 of these on a shipping container. Won't stop them from escaping, but it sure will slow them down until they're too old to care." Todd's horrific actions left police in shock. To understand what led to his crimes, investigators interrogated Todd about his true motivations. At the same time, he recounted his tragic life and twisted ideology. Todd Christopher Samsel was born on March 7, 1971, in Florida. He grew up in South Carolina and Georgia. When he was 2 years old, his parents divorced. His mother gained custody and remarried the following year. Todd had a bad relationship with his stepfather and frequently expressed a desire to live with his biological father, whom he hadn't seen in years. However, his mother firmly refused all his requests. From an early age, Todd exhibited serious behavioral issues. In his early school years, he frequently got into fights and struggled to get along with others. By age 9, he was receiving psychological counseling and was described as emotionally unstable. Concerned about his increasingly negative behavior, his mother sent him to a psychiatric treatment facility in Georgia for emotional control therapy. In 1983, after his mother and stepfather divorced, Todd was sent to Arizona to live with his biological father. There, he changed his last name to his father's and started working various local jobs. He also developed an interest in collecting weapons, influenced by his father. However, the relationship between father and son deteriorated as his father was often absent, preoccupied with multiple romantic relationships. This led Todd to repeatedly express a desire to return to his mother, but she continuously delayed it. On November 25, 1986, at just 15 years old, Todd kidnapped 14-year-old Christy Granado in Tempe, Arizona. He threatened her with a .22 caliber revolver, forcing her to return to his home, where he restrained and imprisoned her. He then took her home and warned that he would harm her family if she told anyone. However, Christy Granado was a brave girl. She reported Todd to her parents, and soon after, the police quickly arrested him. Todd was charged with kidnapping, violent assault, and endangering a child. In 1987, Todd pleaded guilty to kidnapping, while the other charges were dropped. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison and registered as a sex offender. According to court records, Kohlhepp was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and had an above-average IQ of 118. The judge in the case stated that Kohlhepp was very intelligent and should be academically developed, but was also behaviorally and emotionally dangerous and likely incapable of rehabilitation. His probation officer made a similar statement in court records, adding that Todd always felt the world owed him something. On November 3, 2016, Todd declared that he would confess his crimes to the police, but only on the condition that he be allowed to speak with his mother. During the meeting with his mother, Todd allegedly confessed to all the murders and kidnappings he had committed. He expressed how much he missed his mother after years apart, but she responded with indifference and coldness. Todd told his mother that his number of victims was higher than what the police knew. When she asked for a specific number, he coldly replied, "You don't have enough fingers to count them." After Kohlhepp's arrest, police searched his property and discovered a large cache of weapons. Among them were 9mm handguns fitted with silencers, semi-automatic rifles, and an undetermined amount of ammunition. Notably, there were no background check records indicating Kohlhepp had legally purchased these weapons. As a result, investigators concluded that he had likely obtained these weapons through illegal means. In court, faced with undeniable evidence, Todd Kohlhepp admitted to 7 counts of murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of sexual assault. He was sentenced to 7 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole and is currently serving his sentence in a prison in Columbia, South Carolina. When asked if she had anything to say to the man who kidnapped her, Kala Brown firmly declared, "He tried to destroy me, but I didn't break. He couldn't break me. I won." Kala also revealed that during her captivity, she endured daily physical and psychological torture. However, Todd Kohlhepp's mother insisted that her son had no intention of harming Kala and denied that he had abused her. She claimed that Todd only wanted companionship and had no plans to kill Kala like his previous victims. This defense was immediately met with public outrage, especially since the evidence and Kala Brown's testimony proved that she had suffered severe captivity and abuse. The case of Todd Kohlhepp shocked and enraged the American public. The fact that a successful real estate businessman was a serial killer horrified people and eroded their trust. Many argued that Kohlhepp's sentence was not severe enough for the crimes he committed. What do you think about this case? Share your opinion in the comments below and join the discussion. This concludes the video. If you found the story compelling, please like, subscribe, and share to support us. Thank you, and see you in the next video. This concludes the video. If you found the story compelling, please like, subscribe, and share to support us. Thank you, and see you in the next video. In the early morning of June 22, 1983, in Anchorage, Alaska, a terrified girl ran into the police station. Her body was covered in wounds, her breath was heavy, and her eyes were filled with horror. She claimed that she had just escaped from Robert Hansen, the man who had kidnapped, imprisoned, and tortured her for days. But that wasn't the worst part. Hansen had a sick game. He would release his prey into the wilderness and hunt them down like animals. Her testimony sent chills down the police officers' spines. Was there really a cold-blooded killer lurking in their community? However, when they investigated Robert Hansen, the police were baffled. On the surface, he was just a quiet, hard-working baker, a seemingly perfect citizen in the eyes of many. Could there be a monster hiding behind this flawless facade? This is a true story. Like and subscribe to our channel as we uncover the dark secrets of the infamous serial killer, Robert Hansen. Robert Hansen was born in 1939 into a Danish immigrant family in Iowa, USA. His father was a strict baker who enforced rigid rules. Hansen never received love from his father. Instead, he endured abuse and harsh discipline throughout his childhood. Hansen was left-handed, but his father saw it as a defect. Every time he used his left hand, his father would punish him harshly. Moreover, from a young age, he was forced to work tirelessly in the family bakery with no choice or resistance. He worked from dawn until dusk, but was paid only 40 cents a day. 12 at school, Hansen was not only lonely but also ostracized by his classmates. He had a stutter, making speaking in front of the class a nightmare. During puberty, his face was covered in severe acne, making him the target of cruel jokes. The girls at school called him the warty toad and avoided him like a freak. He longed for love, but no girl ever paid him any attention. Every time he saw his classmates dating, he clenched his teeth in resentment. He felt humiliated, rejected, and scorned. His self-doubt consumed him, slowly turning into deep-seated hatred toward women. With no friends, Hansen found a new passion: hunting. It was a world where he didn't have to communicate, a place where he had complete control. In a short time, Hansen displayed an exceptional talent for shooting. He tirelessly trained, improving his skills in archery and firearms, quickly becoming a formidable marksman. But over time, hunting animals no longer satisfied him. A terrifying thought started to form in Hansen's twisted mind. He didn't just want to shoot his prey, he wanted to control it, to savor the moment it trembled in fear. He longed for a hunt where the prey was human. In 1957, Hansen joined the U.S. Army, serving for a year before being discharged. That same year, an event changed his life completely. Led by a prostitute, Hansen experienced what it was like to be a man for the first time. For Hansen, who had always been rejected by women, this feeling wasn't just exhilarating, it became an addiction. In 1960, Hansen became a teaching assistant at a local police academy. This could have been a chance for him to turn his life around, but the wounds and hatred of his past still haunted him. That same year, Hansen met a woman and quickly got married. He thought marriage would help him settle down, but the darkness in his mind never faded. On June 7, 1960, Hansen decided to take revenge on his old school, where he had endured humiliation. He convinced a 16-year-old boy to break into the school with him in the middle of the night. They doused the student parking garage with gasoline, set it on fire, and watched it burn. Hansen stood still, watching the flames rise, thrilled that he had finally taken revenge on those who had looked down on him. But just 2 days later, the police quickly tracked Hansen down. He was arrested and sentenced to 3 years in prison. His wife, married for less than 6 months, was shocked when she found out and immediately filed for divorce. While serving his sentence, Hansen not only lost his wife, but was also diagnosed with bipolar disorder. After 20 months, Hansen was released early due to good behavior. But he hadn't changed. He continued to steal, cheat, and commit fraud to survive. The thrill of deception became a new pleasure, an exhilarating game that consumed him more and more. Over the next 3 years, Hansen was repeatedly arrested for theft and fraud. But then, fate gave him another chance. Hansen met his second wife, a woman who made him seriously consider turning his life around. To bury his past, Hansen and his wife moved to Anchorage, Alaska. There, he seemed to become a different person. Hansen opened a bakery, building the image of a model citizen, well-liked by everyone. However, deep in his mind, Hansen still craved power and absolute control. Hansen wandered into Anchorage's red light district, quietly observing and beginning to search for prey. The streets were filled with strippers, prostitutes, and drug dealers. He lured prostitutes in different ways, sometimes by promising to take artistic photos for hundreds of dollars, slowly leading them into his trap, or simply by paying $300 for a night with them. Regardless of how they were lured in, their fate remained the same. No one cared if one of them disappeared. On September 12, 1982, 2 police officers hunting near the Nick River accidentally discovered a shoe buried under the dirt. When they dug further, they were horrified to find a decomposing body. Forensic investigators quickly arrived, carefully scanning every centimeter of the crime scene. During their search, they found a .223 caliber shell casing, a type of bullet often used in specialized rifles. This indicated that the killer was a professional hunter. The autopsy identified the victim as 24-year-old Sherry Morrow, a dancer at the Wild Cherry Bar. She had been missing since November 1981 after accepting a photography offer from a stranger. The police quickly realized this was not an isolated murder. The police immediately reopened 2 previous murder cases. In 1980, an unidentified body was found near a construction site. In 1981, another body was discovered near a gravel pit. All 3 victims died in the same manner, shot and abandoned in the wilderness. Over the past 2 years, many dancers and prostitutes had mysteriously disappeared, but no one paid attention. Initial investigations revealed that the killer targeted women in the adult industry and exotic dancers, individuals with unstable lives who were vulnerable and rarely reported missing. His targets were not only chosen out of violent desire, but also as a way for him to take revenge on women in general. However, the bodies were all found in remote areas, with no witnesses or clear leads to narrow down a suspect. The case remained unsolved for 2 years, until June 13, 1983, when a young woman ran frantically down 6th Avenue in Anchorage. Her hair was messy, her clothes disheveled, her bare feet covered in wounds. Her wrists were cuffed, and her body was covered in bruises. She screamed desperately for help, but most passers-by just looked away indifferently, assuming she was just another addict having a breakdown. But this girl was not an addict. Her name was Cindy Paulson, and she had just escaped from hell. Cindy ran into the police station, gasping for breath, her eyes filled with terror. "He's gonna kill me! He's gonna kill me!" When officers calmed her down, she burst into tears and told them a horrifying story. The young woman introduced herself as Cindy Paulson, 17 years old. She had run away from home at 12, lived on the streets, struggled with addiction, and survived by working in the adult industry. Cindy recounted that on the night of June 12th, a man named Robert Hansen had approached her, offering $200 for a private session. At first, she hesitated, but when she saw the bespectacled, frail-looking man, she thought he didn't seem dangerous and agreed. But as soon as she approached Hansen's car, he pulled out a gun and ordered her inside. Cindy realized she had no way to escape, so she complied, hoping for an opportunity to survive. He took her home, led her into a dark basement, and tied her tightly to a post with a strong rope. Then he repeatedly assaulted her brutally. The next morning, he excitedly told her he would take her out to play in his plane, planning to fly her to a remote area. However, before departing, he needed to prepare some equipment. Hansen locked her inside his truck while he stepped out to check on the plane. Realizing this was her best chance to escape, Cindy didn't hesitate for a second. She immediately flung the door open and ran. Cindy provided a detailed description of the truck and even the tail number of the plane. The truck he was driving was an old red Ford F-150. Its paint faded over the years, with long scratches on its body and mud caked on its tires. The truck's door had a large dent, possibly from a previous collision. The most crucial detail Cindy remembered was the tail number of the plane. As she ran from the truck, she quickly glanced at the white Piper Super Cub with dark blue stripes, parked right by the runway. On the tail of the plane, she clearly saw the marking N3089Z, a crucial detail that could serve as key evidence for the police to track him down. After receiving Cindy's testimony, the police immediately took action. They checked the truck's license plate and confirmed that the owner was Robert Hansen, a resident of Old Harbor Road. Furthermore, the police discovered that Hansen owned a Piper Super Cub aircraft, which perfectly matched Cindy's description. The police quickly arrived at Robert Hansen's house. When questioned, Hansen remained calm and denied all accusations. He casually claimed he had never met Cindy and insisted she was making up the story. To strengthen his alibi, he even arranged for a close friend to testify that they had been fishing together at the exact time Cindy accused him. Since Hansen was a well-respected businessman in the Anchorage community, the police initially lacked sufficient concrete evidence to charge him. Although Cindy's story was detailed and contained many suspicious elements. Disappointed but not giving up, the police continued their investigation, discreetly monitoring Hansen, waiting for an opportunity to expose his true nature. On September 2, 1983, another body was discovered along the Nick River, bearing the same modus operandi as recent murders. By this time, multiple murders had occurred in the area, but the police were still unable to identify the killer. The sudden increase in the number of missing and murdered women put the Anchorage police force under immense pressure. From 1971 to 1983, approximately 30 women had disappeared, leaving the Anchorage community in fear. Most victims shared common characteristics. They worked in bars, clubs, or as prostitutes, just like Cindy Paulson. Investigator Glenn Floth, a seasoned detective, realized that Cindy's attack could be linked to a serial killer operating in the area. The similarities between Cindy's testimony and the unsolved murders led him to believe that the perpetrator may have already killed multiple women. Realizing the severity of the case, Floth decided to contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, for assistance from criminal behavior experts. He provided all relevant data, including a list of missing victims, discovered bodies, and Cindy's detailed testimony about the perpetrator. The FBI quickly got involved, conducting a criminal psychological analysis to profile the serial killer terrorizing Anchorage. One of the leading criminal psychologists at the time, John Douglas, was assigned to assist the Alaska police in profiling the suspect. Using criminal behavior analysis, John Douglas made several key observations. The killer appeared normal, socially integrated, and did not attract suspicion. He did not kill his victims immediately, but preferred to hunt them like prey. He was likely a highly skilled hunter, familiar with the region's terrain. He possibly used a private plane to transport victims to remote, inaccessible areas. These characteristics perfectly matched Robert Hansen, a well-known bakery owner but also an expert marksman. Upon deeper investigation, police discovered that Robert Hansen had a criminal record, including theft and violent offenses. Notably, he had previously been accused of assaulting and abusing a prostitute. However, due to Hansen's strong reputation in the community, the case was quickly forgotten. By combining the FBI's criminal profiling with actual evidence, the Anchorage police began narrowing their investigation and focusing entirely on Hansen. The police began to suspect that Hansen's perfect alibi was merely a carefully staged act. There was only one logical hypothesis: Hansen's two friends had lied to help him escape justice. To verify the truth, the police decided to summon both of them for questioning using psychological tactics to apply pressure. Under heavy pressure from investigators, both finally confessed that they had not been with Hansen on the night Cindy was kidnapped. This meant that Hansen's alibi had officially collapsed. Realizing the time had come, the police immediately executed their plan. They split into two groups. The first group was assigned to arrest Hansen immediately, preventing him from fleeing or destroying evidence. The second group conducted a thorough search of his house, focusing particularly on his airplane, basement, and other suspicious locations. On October 27, 1983, the police officially received a search warrant for Robert Hansen's house, signed by the judge, allowing for a full-scale investigation into the prime suspect behind multiple murders in Anchorage. During the search of Robert Hansen's house, the police accidentally discovered a hidden attic where he had stored a large arsenal of weapons. Inside, they found a Remington .223 rifle, matching the type of bullets found in many of the victims' bodies. Additionally, the arsenal contained a Thompson submachine gun, a 12-gauge Winchester shotgun, and many other carefully hidden weapons. At the same time, the police found a small wooden box hidden in the attic. When they opened it, they were stunned. Inside were pieces of jewelry belonging to the missing women, including rings, necklaces, and chains. Each item was not just personal property but also a trophy Hansen kept as a memento of his hunts. Furthermore, the police found a pair of handcuffs in Hansen's house, matching Cindy Paulson's testimony. However, the most shocking discovery was a mysterious map. On this map, there were a total of 37 X marks scattered across the Alaskan wilderness. The police immediately compared the X marks with the locations where bodies had previously been found. As they analyzed it, they were horrified to realize that the X marks on the map corresponded to the burial sites of the victims. There was no doubt anymore. This was direct evidence to convict Robert Hansen. He was immediately arrested. On November 3, 1983, based on irrefutable evidence, the Anchorage grand jury officially indicted Hansen on 4 serious charges: assault and kidnapping, using a firearm to commit murder, theft, and insurance fraud. However, Hansen stubbornly denied all accusations. On November 20th, ballistic analysis results were officially released. The FBI confirmed that all bullets found in the victims' bodies were fired from Hansen's gun. Faced with undeniable evidence, Hansen confessed to his crimes. Additionally, he admitted to murdering at least 13 other victims and committing 30 unreported assaults and acts of harassment. Hansen confessed that after capturing his victims, he would fly them to a remote forest cabin. There, he would brutally torture them. After satisfying his urges, Hansen would let them wear only a thin piece of clothing, sometimes blindfolding them, and pretend to be merciful by saying he would set them free. From afar, he would watch with pleasure, relishing every moment as they ran away in terror. Then, Hansen would raise his gun and end their lives with a single gunshot. Under Hansen's guidance, the police uncovered a total of 17 hidden graves scattered throughout the wilderness. On February 18, 1984, the Alaska State Court sentenced Robert Hansen to 461 years in prison, without the possibility of parole. In 2014, due to deteriorating health, Hansen was transferred to the Anchorage Correctional Facility. On August 21st of the same year, his condition worsened. Hansen died in a hospital in Anchorage at the age of 75. When news of Robert Hansen's death was announced, most Alaskans saw it as a fitting and inevitable end for the notorious serial killer. Thank you for following this story. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more terrifying and mysterious cases. Remember, no matter how frightening, the truth must always be told to ensure justice is upheld.